Fondriest, the World Cup holder and the winner of last week's Kellogg's Tour of Britain. Johan Museeuw, currently second in the World Cup. Lance Armstrong, the American world champion. Gianni Bugno, a former double world champion and this year the winner of the Tour of Flanders. And André Schmil, the World Cup leader and winner of Paris-Roubaix. At 9 o'clock on Sunday, the legendary rider Eddy Merckx, 5 times winner of the Tour de France, flagged the 131 riders away from the hedgerow in Leeds. Destination, the Pennines. The city with its great sporting tradition closing its roads for the only World Cup event to be held in Great Britain. And the 18 teams now face almost 7 hours in the saddle. And welcome to the city of Leeds, where the stage is now set for a really great event. Now this is round 7 of 10 in this year's World Cup competition, so before we go to the action, let's have a look at how the other 6 have gone. Traditionally, the first classic of the year is the race from Milan to San Remo, and the longest race of the whole series at that. It was an Italian lone winner, Giorgio Furlan, who celebrated the first 50 points of the year in the World Cup competition. Then the interest swung across to Belgium, round 2, the Tour of Flanders, and a rare victory for an Italian. Gianni Bugno taking on the great Belgian sprinter Johan Museeuw and taking it by an inch right on the line. You can't get much closer than that. Round number 3 was the classic race in France, Paris-Roubaix, and in atrocious conditions on the velodrome at Roubaix, the Russian rider André Schmil became the new World Cup leader. Then for round number 4, back to Belgium, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and another victory for Russia. Evgeny Berzin first across the line alone. But although Berzin had won, Schmil had kept his lead. On to round number 5 and Holland's only World Cup event, the Amstel Gold Race, a great shoulder-to-shoulder battle with Johan Museeuw at last getting a win. So Museeuw is now up to 2nd place overall behind André Schmil. And then the race went on to San Sebastian, Spain's classic race, a lone victory for Armand de las Cuevas. He's promised much and he finally got the greatest win of his career. In 2nd place, the world champion Lance Armstrong, and now he's moved up to 4th.
Currently lying 4th overall in the World Cup competition. The course suits you, it suited you last year. How do you feel?
I feel good. I was happy with the way I rode last week and happy the way the form is coming up. And I'm looking for a good thing today.
Now, with your performance last weekend, you moved up to 2nd, 4th overall. Schmil is a long way ahead, but a lot of people think this circuit won't suit Schmil today.
Oh, I think it does. He's very, very strong. And at the same time, I don't think his lead is so great. You know, if Museeuw wins or I win, and he gets no points, then we move into the World Cup lead. So we're one race out of having that lead.
And these are the leaders now on the first climb of Homos. Lance Armstrong, in fact, is still back in the main field, but the gap is truly enormous at the minute. Somewhere around 10 minutes, the lead for Hendrik Redant, who was the first man to escape. 12 minutes, in fact, is now the lead as they start the climb. We're leaving the village of Home here, and it's now wide open landscape, and almost by tradition, Paul Sherwin, the crowd's absolutely enormous for another big race in Great Britain.
Well, this is a superb place for the people to come to because it's halfway between the Manchester area and the Yorkshire area, which are 2 very big cycling distances.
And so the main field on the climb, but 12 minutes behind here now as they also are approaching the village of Home. And those 3 leaders came together just before the climb of Homos. In fact, the break being done by Hendrik Redant. He went at 21 miles covered. That's around about 35 kilometers. And then he was joined by Paul van Heeft from Belgium and the Flandern 2002 team, and Gert van Bont, another young professional from the Trident team. So 2 untried riders here with the very experienced Hendrik Redant, winner of Paris Tours a couple of years ago, and the fastest man. He holds the blue ribbon for single-day classic racing.
Have to take note as well that Hendrik Redant is actually riding for his normal team here in the Leeds International Classic. He's riding for the ZG Mobili team. He rode this last week, the Kellogg's Tour, for the FS Maestro British squad as a guest rider. Now he's with his normal teammates, and this is Paul van Heeft, who is a first-year professional, very unknown quantity. I don't know a great deal about him apart from the fact that he managed to finish 50th earlier in the season in the Grand Prix of Frankfurt. It's a good move, though, early on in the race to try and put a little bit of pressure on the main field, and at the moment, the main field coming up towards the bottom of the climb of Homos, there's no major reaction.
And you can see Vyacheslav Yekimov in the centre there in the blue helmet, and Steve Swart of the Motorola team off to the right, and Scott Sunderland also with the white cap on, slightly away from the left of our picture. They're the men setting the pace behind. These are the leaders much farther up the long climb here of Homos, which really is a difficult climb. It takes the riders, in fact, up to an altitude of 1,600 feet, and we're now approaching the 67-mile point of the race.
Well, you can see there it's a very difficult climb for these riders too. They've been at the head of affairs from very early on. In fact, after 23 kilometers, 23 miles, Henrik Redant broke clear, and when they hit the climb here for the first time, it really is causing problems in their legs. And you see Henrik Redant here coming to the front, but Van Heeft in the yellow jersey on the left-hand side really seems to be suffering on the climb of Homos here.
Well, here's the latest time gap coming in. You see they've lost over a minute now on the climb, and they seem to be content to let Paul Van Heeft do most of the work here. He seems to be a good climber. Redant certainly isn't a great climber. That's probably why he went away early on. Now you get a beautiful view here of the climb here, which is on the Derbyshire-Yorkshire borders at the top. The radial pylon marks the summit of the climb, and then it's all downhill to Woodhead on the other side. But we're now really in the heart of the Pennine chain. And no reaction here at all, Paul. We've got the nice, compact field, and nobody seeming to be too worried about that breakaway.
Well, not really. I think they realise that these are riders of lesser-known qualities, and they're quite sure. They know Henrik Redant will be a lot easier to pull back as we get toward the end of the race here. Henrik Redant, I think, just wanted to build up some kind of lead before these two circuits here of Homos and Woodhead, just to hope that he could hang on to that lead. But the speed will start to pick up as we get onto the climb, and there will be a natural selection. And this, to me, is a fantastic racing circuit.
So Van Heeft is doing all of the work, and he is indeed a little bit of a surprise for us and for all our commentators here on this international classic race, because he's never featured at the front of a major race before. But he certainly knows how to climb. He set all of the pace on the climb. Henrik Redant, who's just come out of the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, where he rode very well indeed. He finished second on the stage in Liverpool. But now it looks as though we're going through the village of Home here with the main field, and they're leaving the same men setting the pace at the front. No big effort at all from the main field. To be expected, I think. They're very wary of this course because it is a very difficult one. There's a long way to go, and as you can see, an enormous crowd has made the journey up to the top of Homos, where the riders now go off on a loop of 22 miles before they come back onto the climb for a second time. And after the second circuit, they will then leave the area and start heading back towards the city of Leeds, and then they will do 3 5-mile finishing circuits.
Henrik Redant setting the pace as we go over the top here, and this is the toughest climb actually on this circuit that they go around, because the Woodhead climb really is a climb for stronger riders. They can use a much bigger gear to get up there, whereas on this kind of a climb here, they will use the smallest gear probably of the day, which would be something like 42 sprocket at the front and 21 at the back.
Well, the cheers are reserved here for these three, and the crowd enjoying the spectacle. It really is a beautiful day in the heart of Yorkshire, and the gap's still coming down, but really not by anything significantly. They've probably conceded about a minute and a half on the climb at the moment to the main field behind, but now for them the descent will begin. It's a very good clean descent, hardly a bend on it, all the way down to the main road, where they then will hairpin left onto the road through Woodhead. And you can see from our helicopter how that road goes all of the way back down, and right down at the bottom of the climb you've got this group here, and again they're staying very, very compact. Oh, and there's been a crash, and this is actually in the village of Home, and this is Dag Otto Lauritsen who's gone down, the oldest man in the race, and he looks a little bit in pain, Paul. I think he's basically okay.
I think he's going to be okay, but very strange because his teammate, in fact, Bo Hamburger, crashed at almost the same point a couple of years ago, so that's right. Quite strange. It's sad to see. Dag, I think, will probably retire from the race under these circumstances.
And so Dag Otto Lauritsen in a little bit of pain there at the bottom of the climb, as why we now see Peter de Klerk on the climb here from the Lotto team, early leader in the King of the Mountains. In fact, Paul, he does ride these small hills very well indeed.
He's a superb rider on the shorter climbs, a very explosive rider, and That's why he managed to hold the King of the Mountains in the Tour de France for such a long time. Once we got into the big mountains, though, then he really did disappear from the scene. But these climbs like Home Firth today really do suit him. And at the back of the main field here, we can see that Dag Otto Lauritsen will be withdrawing from the race and will very soon climb into the hospital, and that's into the ambulance. That is a sad day for Dag Otto, because he really would have liked to have ridden well here today.
He's riding out his final season as a professional, and the fact he was a professional at all for the former paratrooper from Norway, because he badly broke his leg in a parachuting accident many years ago, and they said he wouldn't walk again, never mind race a bike at the level at which he has ridden a bike. Scott Sunderland there making the pace for TVM.
Very nice to see already Andre Schmeel defending his lead in the World Cup competition, riding at the front there in the white jersey. Although he's in fact a teammate of Peter de Klerk, he's not wearing his normal team jersey today, because that white jersey with the world bands down the front there is the jersey that denotes the leader of the World Cup competition.
Here's Scott Sunderland, who is the King of the Mountains in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain. A very convincing winner he was as well, and in fact he seems to have found his form at this stage of the year. He might well have a very good world championship. Alex Zule in the yellow jersey there of his Onse team, also riding well. But this is the pace being made at the front by Peter de Klerk and Andre Schmeel, the defending leader in the World Cup today. They're keeping a very nice tempo on this climb now, not rushing away, not panicking because of the riders who are away up front, but just holding their tempo. It looks like Maurizio Fondriest is also here. Gianni Bugno is also in this back group. But the field, well, it's just doing what it should do, Paul. It's holding a nice steady pace.
They are, but I think one or two riders are starting to suffer a little bit further down the field there, because the pressure is being put on by Peter de Klerk all the time. And I think as we go over to the climb of Woodhead and come back here to Homos for the next time, the speed will really start to pick up quite a lot, and then the lead of those three riders will come down dramatically.
Well, it's interesting to note the world champion Lance Armstrong on the far side of the fence there in that white jersey of world champion, because he'll defend that title in 2 weeks' time in Sicily, and he was a very worthy winner of the race, the youngest man to win the world title in fact since Eddie Merckx, who started the race here today, and he won it last year in Oslo in Norway, and he broke away in atrocious conditions. Riders falling off, and look at this, Paul. It looks as though the British champion Brian Smith is in a little bit of trouble. He's just faded off our picture there, and it looks as though he's gone off the back.
He really is suffering, so that lets us know that the pressure is quite high at the moment, and all the work being done at the front by Peter de Klerk. And obviously, if Andre Schmeel can get some points today, that makes him a lot safer towards taking the overall title in this year's World Cup.
So the three leaders are up and over the top, and Andre Schmeel and his teammate Peter de Klerk are bringing the riders up towards the summit of Homos, still quite a few minutes behind. That's the situation, 92 kilometers to go, so that's around about 56 miles. Van Heeft has now gone clear as we come on to the second climb of Homos. He's broken away from Redant and from the other rider in that breakaway, Geert van Bont. Now, this rider is surprising me, I must say, Paul, because nobody knows hardly anything about him. He's 22 years of age. Last year, as an amateur, I don't think he had a win, yet he's landed a contract here with the Flandern 2002 team.
Well, it's an interesting team as well, because the team was actually promoted by the Flemish government, the Flemish half of the Belgian country there, and the reason was to give riders the possibility of turning professional, which is why he possibly got a chance to ride on this team here. At the moment, his style is very strange and looks to me like he's suffering.
And Sean Yates has gone on the attack. We'd heard a message of this coming up on the car radio. In fact, Yates has gone clear. The rider behind him is Andrea Taffi from Italy, and that behind the two of them is in fact Vyacheslav Yekimov, the runner-up in the recent Kellogg's Tour of Britain. A very strong breakaway indeed.
Very interesting move too for Sean Yates, because he was really expecting to work for Lance Armstrong, the current world champion at the moment, and in fact Yates has found himself at the head of affairs. Interesting to see Ekimov there. This year Ekimov doesn't have any points at all in the World Cup event, and if he could get some, that would really move him up in the overall standings. But the two leaders, the two former leaders here, Hendrik Redant and Van Bont, have been left far away down the climb by the man who attacked there, Van Himt.
Well, I'm not sure whether in fact Van Heeft should have done this, because quite frankly he doesn't have a great deal of experience, but he's not planning surely a ride to the finish on his own, and he would have done better to have coaxed his two erstwhile companions up the hill, and then they would have been able to have helped him a little bit once over the top of this climb. Clearly he's the best climber of the three of them, and this is a group behind. Notice the head of the peloton now, and still the Lotto boys are trying to keep their man Andre Schmiel very much in this race. And sitting there, number 8 at the front of the group is Jim van der Laar, and the rider in the white jersey is Andre Schmiel.
Well, the Lotto squad doing a fantastic job here to get Schmiel back up into contention. Strangely enough, as those three riders have gone clear, but Schmiel riding like the leader, in fact, of a racing team at the moment. He's doing all the work here as if he was the leader of a stage race.
Well, just look at this situation now. Paul van Hyft really is hurting himself on the climb. The crowd are cheering him all of the way up the hill. It's not often, Paul, you see a good Belgian climber either.
Well, there aren't very many these days, and that's for sure, but Paul van Hyft really is trying extremely hard at the moment. I find it strange because he's only got 20 to 25 seconds lead over the two chasers there, and he should have stayed with them so that after this they could start to work together, because it's an awful long way back to Leeds from the top of this climb, and a group of three riders could work very well together, even over Woodhead, which is not really a difficult climb.
Now back to the Yates group. This is the chasing group. They are making inroads into that leading split at the front now, and Yates, the man who likes the expression the animal, is now giving us one of his famous facial expressions here. Always puts his tongue out and bites it, and he just gets going, and he really is firing on all cylinders now. This man, as he grows older, just gets better and better. And he was telling us only the other day, since the Tour de France, when he led it for a day, he's come back to Britain for these two international races, the Kellogg's Tour of Britain and this race, and he can't believe his popularity. Well, it's a wonderful crowd that's turned out on Homos today. This could be the top of Alpe d'Huez in the Tour de France, and I think this young man is enjoying probably his finest moment since he turned professional. Paul van Hyft coming up towards the summit of Homos for the second time, but believe me, it is still a long way to go down to the finish in Leeds, and when you get to Leeds, you still have those 5 miles, that's 8-kilometre laps to come. These are the two chasers that, in fact, Van Hyft left just before the start of the climb of Homos for the second time, and again it's Gert van Bont, the 23-year-old new professional, who both Paul Schoen and myself believe that this is a man for the future.
Well, he rode exceptionally well in the Kellogg's Tour because he was in front of the race for an awful long time on that stage over the moors, and once he was caught by the big group of 10 riders, he really continued to work well in that group. And then today, again, in a superb condition, he's at the front of affairs, attacking again, and he really seems to have a great style.
And there we are, the face of the leader, and he's going to find it getting a little bit easier shortly. He starts the long run down back to the road through Woodhead, and he's getting into his full streamline position here as he'll start the descent, which will take him up to around about 100 kilometres an hour. There you can see the descent, hardly a bend on it. It's a superb descent for the fearless and free in this race today. We're a bit further back now. We've gone back behind the two chasers, in fact, to Yekimov and Yates, and then sitting at the back here, the Italian Andrea Taffi, who just occasionally does a very good ride. He's had a couple of wins in his career, big ones, and he just pops in ever so often in the move that matters, and he's caught a good group here with two very strong men. This is Yekimov.
Yekimov riding excellent this year. He's had some fantastic wins. He's had 8 wins so far this season, with the Tour du Pont probably be one of the best wins that he had, and he pushed Maurizio Fondries all the way there in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, which finished just on Friday. I was very surprised though to see how much time he did lose in that short time trial to Maurizio Fondries, who's on his way back from injury, and in fact I would have put down Yekimov as the favourite to take that time trial stage.
I would have agreed until we saw the form that Fondries came out with. He really did ride well. He was rather stunned by Fondries, and in fact both Paul Schoen and me thought that Fondries would start favourite today. Now we're looking at the leader on the descent, and he's making up ground all the time at the moment, and Redant is now over the top and also into slipstream, and he's really flying down this climb, Paul. Now this is the hill you personally know very well. You've raced over this hill so many times.
Yeah, it's a great hill, and this is fantastic descent too, because there's hardly a corner in it, and you can just let everything go. You don't even have to touch your brakes. Then once you get down to the bottom, there's a little bit of a dip, and you can almost cruise up the other side, and then we get down to the Woodhead reservoir at the bottom and start the climb up to Woodhead.
Now we go back to Sean Yates. He's still on his way up, along with Vyacheslav Yekimov, who's looking a little bit concerned by the effort being made here by Sean Yates. You can bet your life that all of the crowds are shouting straight at Sean now once they recognise him on the climb. And Taffy wisely staying number 3. At least I think he's still there, just behind. There he is, just behind Yekimov, and he's climbing up towards the summit now. So the gap really is coming down. The leaders are over the top and of course are making high-speed descents. But these 3 will soon be into their stride once they're clear of the summit here.
Yates looking extremely strong today. In fact, he's gone from strength to strength, and for me this is probably one of Sean Yates' best years, because he was talking only 2 years ago of retiring, and now he's just so strong. I kind of wonder how many more years he can ride, because he's setting the pace here at the front of the climb here on Homos, and he's really doing a great job. And he's a man who's going to enjoy the descent down the other side, because Sean is one of the best descenders in the world.
So the waters part for Sean Yates, Vyacheslav Yekimov and Andrea Taffy. An Italian, a Russian and a rider from Great Britain. And it's very nice to see Yates on the attack today. And goodness knows how the crowd will react. In fact, Yates got up to those leaders, Paul, and the bunch didn't come back.
Well, that would be incredible for Sean to get a classic victory, because he doesn't have a classic victory on his books. He's had a stage win in the Tour de France, he's had the yellow jersey, but he's never actually won one of the classic races which the Leeds International event has now become. And it could well be that he's really going to get up there, because at the moment the gap, 1 lap ago, was over 12 minutes. It's now 4 minutes and 56 seconds to Sean Yates.
So there we have the man in the front in the white jersey with the vertical stripe, the leader of the World Cup, and now the world champion Lance Armstrong coming off his wheel and also turning the screw a little tighter. So the big guns are now beginning to fire here, and the other rider with them, Gianluca Bortolami. There's a man who is now having a great season. Previously a double stage winner in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, but he didn't ride it this year, and he's come here now, obviously, Paul, with a big finish here in mind.
Well, definitely, let's not forget he had that superb stage victory in the Tour de France. Now, this is a very important piece of riding at the moment. We have Lance Armstrong, the world champion. He's currently lying in 4th place in the overall standings of the World Cup, and Shamil doing a great job by matching him all the way. Bortolami is a lot further down in those standings, but this is quite important, because if these 3 riders can now get across to the Sean Yates group, it gives Yates and Armstrong a big chance, because there are 2 of them and they'd be the only 2 riders from the same team represented in a leading group. But at the moment they're quite a long way further back. In fact, there's something like 7 minutes behind the leader, so that puts him 3 minutes behind the Sean Yates Ekimov group.
But there's still time indeed for them to catch up, and Schmill is riding exceptionally well today. He had a little bit of a dip in his form after he won Paris-Roubaix, but now he really seems to have refound himself in the second half of the World Cup competition. It takes a traditional break after the 5th round with the Amstel Gold Race, because we then go on to the major races like the Tour de France, the Tour of Spain and the Tour of Italy. And once the riders have those races out of the way, they come back into the mode of World Cup cycling. And Schmill looks to have come into this second phase with a very good piece of form, Paul.
He's in very good shape, especially after finishing 5th last week in the San Sebastian Classic. And another man who seems to be progressing, because he's had a superb year considering he is the current world champion at the moment, is Lance Armstrong. Because he had a 2nd place in Liège-Bastogne-Liège earlier in the year, but he's had a great deal of difficulty actually winning races, and this might be something he needs, because the world title event is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and a good ride today in the Leeds International event would really help him.
46 kilometres now remaining in the Leeds Classic 1994. That's about 30 miles to go. Welcome back, and the man in the lead over Homos, the Belgian rider Paul van Heeft, well, he found his long breakaway foiled in the end by broken gears. Just look at the rear of his frame. His gears have completely disappeared. Now the bike changed for him. But I'm afraid that signaled a regrouping, and all of the big names were soon back together again in one bunch. And the Leeds Classic now just 32 kilometres from home. And this is Vyacheslav Yekimov. Then comes the world champion Lance Armstrong, getting a bit of a reputation as the eternal second in the big races without the big victory since he won the world title last year. He was second in the Tour du Pont for a 2nd time this year. He was second in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He's finished 2nd in the previous championship of Zurich, and he's finished 2nd in San Sebastian last week. So he'd really like to get a win now, and he keeps trying pretty hard too. Now Ronan Pensek goes through. followed by Rebelin.
It's actually Van Zelle who must have come
Right,
across. There were
absolutely.
2 or 3 riders coming across there, and Van Zelle must have been one of them. As we look at the back of this group, also the leader of the World Cup, Andre Shamil, has come back there as well. I think on the far side there, that's Max Chiandri too.
Yes, indeed. Shamil has caused the reaction that has brought up basically all of that big group, and we're inside the last 20 miles of the race now, 30 kilometers to go. So we'll be through the centre of Leeds in just a few kilometers. As Andre Shamil, World Cup holder with 115 points, but you know, if Museo scores today, or Lance Armstrong, then he would lose his lead unless he finished very close to them because of the 50 points for the victory, and it's only 35 for second place.
In fact, just as we were at the back of this group, I managed to catch a glimpse of Johan Museo, so he hasn't missed out on the move either. The top 3 riders from the top 4 in the World Cup at the moment are in this group, and it's going to be a fantastic finish. And this looks to me like Ekimov trying to break clear now. In fact, he's trying to get across to Bo Hamburger. Hamburger's ridden extremely well over the last couple of weeks. Winner in the Tour de France earlier this year. Hamburger been very active all day, but Ekimov has decided he wants to get clear and go for the big one.
Ekimov is one of those riders, in the end he has to break away because he doesn't crack the sprint finish at this level of cycling, although really I always feel he is a good sprinter, but at this level of cycling he won't beat them in the sprint. He knows if he's going to win he must break clear of the field and do it alone. He has that strength if he can get into a position to break clear before the race gets into the last 4 or 5 kilometers. Well, Steve Swart.
This man really has clicked since he got selected for the Tour de France. He was a last-minute selection for the Motorola squad, and in fact, I think having got through that Tour de France, he really has taken a leap forward. He's really come into overdrive, if you like. He's been riding superbly over the last couple of weeks. He's been in the breaks in the Kellogg's Tour, and here he is again at the front in the Leeds International Classic, putting the pressure on, acting as a driving force in this breakaway of 10 to 20 men at the moment, because we're not getting too much information on the race radio, but it's a very big group and all the main favourites are there.
So Swart setting the pace, and then it's Aldag, I think, getting across to him there, just reaching him. Again, another counter-offensive is going off down the road, and Swart is waiting for no one. Swart has opened the gap, and the telecom team are trying to get on terms with him, but this is a good move again. He seems to be the carrot, Paul, and Armstrong will be content to let him go and try and come up in the second wave.
Well, he's obviously trying to take the sting out of the tail of everybody else to set up an attack, I think, on the finishing circuit for Lance Armstrong. We know this is a tough finishing circuit around here, and there are 1 or 2 little climbs which can be used as great attacking points. Sean Yates back in the group as well. Yates must have been very attentive there. He was over the top of Homos, but at the front, it's still Stephen Swart.
So we look around here at the group. The rider sitting there at the back is Sepp Holtzman from the Trident team, but it was his teammate, in fact, who rode so well today in that breakaway, and that was Gert van Bont. At one stage they were 12 minutes ahead of the field, but as so often happens, the top professionals await their time and then begin the chase down in earnest and reel them in. But once more this group has reformed, and they're leaving Steve Swart on the front to set the pace. In fact, it looks like Sean Yates has gone on the front. No, it's still Swarty. Yeah. I have to say I've been very impressed with Andre Shamil, Paul, because he really looks sharp today. He seems to have warmed to wearing that white leader's jersey in the World Cup this year, and if he wins it, he'll become the first former Eastern Bloc rider to take the trophy.
And it really has been a great change for him this year, because last year he rode on the GBMG squad, and there was a little bit of friction there because they said he had to ride as a domestique all the time, and he wasn't happy with the politics of the team, so he left to join the Belgian Lotto squad, and it really has changed him. And that victory earlier in the year in Paris-Roubaix was one of the most dramatic I've seen, and one I think that Johan Museo will think about for a long time, because Museo went into Paris-Roubaix as the #1 favourite, and when Shamil attacked, he just could not respond to the attack of Shamil. He came to within 10 seconds at one stage and then just had to let him go because he just couldn't match his speed over those cobblestones.
Well, here's the New Zealand rider, Stephen Swart, and he's just keeping the pace on and seeing what the decision is behind. But he's become the attraction now for the rest of the race to chase him down. We're on the outskirts of Leeds now. We start to run in towards the finishing line. We go straight to the finishing line, then we will commence 3 big circuits of the city itself, and 8 kilometers a lap.
25 kilometers to go for Swart, and Swarty, as he's called, is really riding like a man possessed today. He may well find that with the marking going on between the main leaders of the group behind, he might have a chance of getting away and putting some time between himself and that group, because all the main leaders are there, and it's going to become a very tactical race over the next few kilometers. This is the champion of Belgium, the champion of Germany, sorry, we saw have that horrendous crash earlier in the year in the Tour de France and get up and carry on to finish the stage.
That's right, that was Jens Heppner, just swinging off, trying to reorganize the chase perhaps a little bit. He rides for the German Telecom team, and the group has caught them. I mean, the work rate was formidable, but Swart is now going to have to relax and allow the race to swamp him once more. But even so, these riders have so much work to do now as we go down onto the circuit. The man taking up the pace here is the Maillot Jaune of the Tour de France when we left England after the Portsmouth stage, and that's Flavio Vanzella. And so Vanzella now leading the race towards the start-finishing line, which they left something like more than 5 hours ago.
Well, that attack by Swart has actually dragged a little group of riders clear here, and that's going to be dangerous, because at this stage of the game, as we get to the finishing circuit, it's dangerous to let a group as big as this, which looks to me around about 10 to 12 riders, go clear, and none of the favourites are actually in this group at the moment.
Here's Bo Hamburger, 20th this year in the Tour de France, his best tour. In fact, I feel he was discovered in Britain, because a couple of years ago in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, he was part of a long breakaway, and everybody remarked then that this rider from Denmark was going to be something special. And this year he's made his most progress. A stage win in the Tour de France at Trelisac, and 20th overall in Paris. Terrific result. And this man here, Heppner, champion of Germany, well, he finished 10th in the Tour de France a couple of years ago, but these last 2 years he really hasn't realised his promise of that Tour 3 years back.
Another man who's been a revelation this year is Vanzella. He's ridden so well since he held the yellow jersey, but he's not really a big winner of races. In fact, he only won one race last year, and that was a stage in a small stage race in the Basque country called the Bicicleta Vasca.
And so Hamburger having a little dig now as Gianni Farazin sits up and goes back down the line, and immediately the move again from the New Zealand rider Swart. This is a very nice little group they're pulling away at the moment now, and Swart is willing to keep it going. It was the attack of Stephen Swart at the front that forged the opening of this breakaway. I think it's Laurent Dufaux setting the pace through now.
And Gianluca Bortolami is in there as well, the man who was the lead at the stage winner in the Tour de France. It's a very strange move, because they've got a big gap, but at the back it's Armstrong in the front of the peloton putting the pressure on to try and bring them all back in. It's a strange move by Armstrong, in fact not quite so intelligent, because he has two teammates in this leading group of 8 riders.
So they go over the start-finishing line. Now 3 circuits of the city of Leeds, 5 miles, 8 kilometres a circuit, and there is not a big gap there at all now as they start to make their counter moves. And Massimo Girotto leading them through, the winner here 2 years ago, and it looks as though he is also sharp today. That's the main field going through, and it is vastly smaller than it was when they left this morning some 5.5 hours ago.
Good to see Sean Yates was in that second group there as well. Big Yates managed to make a little bit of a comeback, because he wasn't in the original breakaway here, so he must have jumped across on the road on the run into Leeds here. You see now the group of, looks to me like 9 riders going clear, and there's a major reaction behind by Massimo Girotto trying to come clear, but the riders starting to get into some kind of a rhythm so they can work together.
So 9 men setting the pace, 2 members of Team Motorola, so they've got numerical advantage at least, and we'll see shortly whether indeed that main field is going to close them down, but the gap is still a reasonable one.
There are also 2 members of the GBMG squad in there as well, with Max Chianri. This is what remains of the main field, and looking back down there in the pink jersey looks very much to me as if I can see Maurizio Fondriest, the winner of the Kellogg's Tour.
So this split all came in the closing 20 miles or so, running into the city, and Gianni Bugno, number 11 there in the yellow, is also in this group. So we've got Bugno and Fondriest both trapped in the 3rd group on the road, and about 1.25 minutes down now on that leading group of 9 riders, and that is something of a turn-up.
But it's a good move here. We have 2 Motorola riders, 2 GBMG riders, In fact, Flavio Vanzella is there with Max Chiandri, so this is a good move for Chiandri, but it really is hotting up behind, and it may well be that that group of 12 riders behind can get up there and we'll have a general regrouping. But Swart, all the time, every time it slows down, he goes to the front and puts the pressure on.
So, just 23 kilometres remaining in the Leeds Classic. We'll take a short break. Welcome back with the leaders on the second of 3 circuits here in the Leeds Classic, and there's about 10 kilometres to go. And this is Bo Hamburger, Vyacheslav Yekimov, and they're still at the head of the race, but this group has split up again, and it looks like Bortolami has gone once more. He's a very aggressive rider this year. He's now developed into a top rider, and Gianluca Bortolami, remembering that he failed by the narrowest of margins, a single second, to take the overall lead in the Tour de France, and that of course saw the jersey on that particular day be taken by Britain's Sean Yates. Yates in the second group on the road at the moment.
We have to be thankful for one thing, that he made the fatal error of taking a little bit of a slowdown as he came up to the finish line that day to zip up his jersey and look smart as he came across the finish line. But you must never forget, a race isn't won till you cross the line, and the clock is always ticking by.
So Bortolami has gone on his own, and the way the group are not reacting, it looks to me as though they're going to have a little trouble bringing him back. We're a lap and a half from the finish.
But there's such a tactical race going on behind. If he can get just 100 meters, that may well be all he needs, because nobody has really got the guts, I don't think, to chase behind, because they're all worried about their own chances. And he's the man who's taken the race by the scruff of the neck and managed to launch his attack. And he looks extremely strong. You see how he's trying to get every last little bit of energy out of him. You can see how far forward he's going on the saddle at the moment. That's a sign that he really is giving everything he's got, and he's dragging himself forward on the bike and sitting as far forward as possible, getting that big gear over. And it'd be nice if we could just have a look back down the road, which is what Bortolami wants. In fact, he's got his hand up there. I'm not sure if he's calling back to his team car to come across.
Well, he's got the gap certainly at the moment. His hand did go up. Maybe his team car will come and ask him what's going on. Bortolami has gone with great determination now, and I feel that if he does come back, he will have used the energy that he may have kept for the finish. But indeed, he's committed now to the attack on his own on this circuit around the centre of Leeds, and he's built himself a nice little lead. Well, he's had great success on previous visits here to Great Britain. He's had a win on separate occasions when he's taken part in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain. So he's no stranger to winning, but if we look over his shoulder, there is the chase group coming at him.
Looks very much, in fact, as if it's just one rider coming across to him as well, and he's got the gap, and he's giving it everything he's got at the moment. You can see he's throwing himself all over the bike, trying to get every last little bit of energy from his body down into his legs and to get those pedals round. But there has been a reaction behind, and it may well be that one rider is coming clear, and that's Vyacheslav Ekimov. He's been so attentive today, and he's got him in his sights at the moment.
This is exactly the move for Yekimov. I said earlier, he's got to win on his own because he hasn't got the sprint. But if he could get up to Bortolami, he might well give Bortolami a great run for his money in a sprint finish. And Yekimov, once the fastest pursuiter the world had ever seen, is now settling into his pursuit style once more.
And he's got him in his sights there. It's not going to be very long before we see them coming into the finishing straight, and then they've got one lap of the circuit of Leeds to go through, and that will be an interesting move because Ekimov could save the year for Word Perfect. They won some great races abroad. They won the Tour du Pont with Vyacheslav Ekimov. They also won the Tour of Valencia, but to get a World Cup would really save them from the Tour de France that they had, because they didn't really have a very good Tour de France this year.
No, they didn't. And Yekimov certainly tried to win there, and he was caught out every time. But Bortolami is the man now who is throwing down the gauntlet as he heads back in towards the hedgerow here in the city of Leeds. He'll hear the bell for the last lap when he gets there. And then he's got to go all the way around that circuit again, including the nasty little drags on it. And I think Yekimov has got him in his sights. He's gunning for him. Here he comes now, and look at the speed of Yekimov, who's coming right up behind him. Tremendous piece of riding, the speed of Yekimov, but the whole group, you know, is closing down. The flight of Yekimov, I think, has given them new life because they're going like trains themselves.
Well, he's got him in sight, and it looks to me as if it's Gianni Farazin has made the reaction behind the man who started the move so long ago before he came down into the streets of Leeds here, and Farazin is putting the pressure on, and it looks as if there's been a major sprint there, and in fact Max Chianri is one of the riders who has missed out because it's his teammate Flavio Vanzella who's in the front part of the split there. That's a bad move for Chianri.
So Farazin leads, and Vanzella goes over in that lead group in second place. Some 5 riders now trying to chase them down, but this is the remnants of the breakaway, led by Girotto. And Chiandri, Swart and Hefner are the 4 riders now who are also in on the chase, but they've really made a mistake, I think, because look at this, Paul. Yekimov is almost able to reach out now and touch Bortolami, but Bortolami is really making him work to close that gap.
Well, he realizes the danger of Vyacheslav Ekimov. He doesn't want him to get to his back wheel, and he will keep going right up until the very last minute. And there we had Rolf Aldag going by. He was still over 30 seconds behind the leaders, but the big race is going on at the front here. Bortolami will not desist from the pressure that he's putting on, and Ekimov is just at something like 20 meters, and he can't close the last few meters of that gap, but I'm sure by the top of the climb he will. And in fact now it looks to me as if Bortolami said, well, that's it, I'll try and work with this man from Russia, Ekimov.
So they've got themselves together, and Yekimov will want a couple of minutes, I think, to recuperate on the back wheel there of Bortolami and take a few deep breaths, because that was a classic pursuit across the gap. And Bortolami, as you can see, wants him to come straight by, and in fact Yekimov says, no problem, here I come. He's gone through, and Bortolami's going to grab his wheel.
What a chance to see the difference in styles. You can see how, in fact, Bortolami was punching away at the bike, trying to force, but Ekimov is so smooth on the bike. He's a pure time trialist. He's tucked down low in a nice position. The top part of his body doesn't move at all, and he just pours those pedals round as if it was just something going along in oil.
So we now have 2 leaders on the final circuit of Leeds, and the rest of the race is now out of it. There is a classic chase being done by Rolf Aldag, who left the Andre Schmil group, and he's now around about 30 seconds before he latches on to the remnants of this leading group. But Aldag will not know that these 2 riders have flown. First it was Bortolami, and now Yekimov has got up to him, and Bortolami still has a lot of fight in him. A little bit of a reunited group here, because we've got sitting at the back Frankie Andreu and Flavio Vanzella. Then we go forward, we've got, in fact, Bo Hamburger is there, and also Gianni Farazin. And there was one rider at the front I didn't quite latch onto, but I think it was possibly Laurent Dufaux. Side by side, Bortolami takes a good look into the face of Yekimov to see if there's a message there to say he's struggling, and I don't think there is, but I think, in fact, Bortolami is struggling.
Well, he's been looked to me over the last couple of kilometers as if he's fighting all the time. This may well be just a ruse to try and put Ekimov off his guard a little bit. You see he's rolling his head and rolling his shoulders a little bit. That's the kind of signs that the rider would normally show when he's tired. But he keeps looking over his shoulder to see what the situation is behind. The gap at the moment is round about 15 seconds. There was no chase being organized by that group of 5 riders who were trying to get into contention. Well, Yekimov is the kind of rider just like Chris Boardman. He is made of pure speed, and that's the difference between him and Bortolami, who's riding at the back at the moment. We've got 3 kilometers to go as we look back over our shoulders to see, and it looks to me as if it's all over behind. They're not going to get back up to these 2 riders. The winner of the Leeds International Classic, barring any incident, will be one of the 2 riders here.
Well, I'll tell you what now, even if I were a betting man, Paul, I wouldn't like to choose between them, and I would still feel that Yekimov will try to leave him, because surely he's not going to leave it to the risk of a sprint, because Bortolami is not a bad finisher.
Well, he isn't, and as I've said, he's a punchy rider. He can explode, and you can tell by the way he's riding. He's the kind of rider who's got that acceleration over the last 200 or 300 meters, and that is what Ekimov needs to do. The whole group now behind has come back together. The 4 riders have been caught, and there's a general regrouping happened, and now it's too late for the GBMG boys. They're thinking about victory for Chianri, but they should have thought about that a little bit earlier. Absolutely. When the group was together.
Absolutely. In fact, Chiandri there riding in second place behind Flavio Vanzella. The man who looked to be in a little bit of trouble just hanging off the back of that group was Gianni Farazin. But right now, as Paul Sherwin has said, I don't think any of them are going to see the front. All those 2 riders, the rest of this race. Yekimov is faced now for the first time, showing a little bit of pain there. But he too is on the verge of a great result here, because Yekimov, he's won the championship of Zurich, which is a world-class race, in 1992. And in that particular year, he finished 6th overall in the World Cup. but since then he's not had a great season in 93. This year, though, in fact, Yekimov has won the Tour of Valencia in Spain, the Tour du Pont in America. He finished third in the great French race, third in the Paris-Nice, and we're inside now, 1 kilometre to go. And just a couple of days ago, he finished second in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain. So he has the pedigree. And Bortolami, though, I'm wondering, Paul, if he has the sprint.
Well, he may well have. It's getting very nervous now. There was a little switch of the elbow by Yekimov to try and force Bortolami to come to the front. But he wouldn't come because we're so close to the finish now. He realizes that his big chance is to let the Russian rider lift the pace up, because then he, with his punch, could just get past him in the last 100 or 200 meters. In fact, the group are coming down very quickly behind, but these two riders are going to decide the sprint. Yekimov starts.
Well, Yekimov starts, and my goodness me, he had no choice, but I feel he shouldn't have put himself out in the front. Bortolami is going to come up on his shoulder now, and Bortolami lost his back wheel, but he's kept it upright, and Bortolami and Yekimov are shoulder to shoulder, and I can't tell from this distance, it looks to me as though Bortolami gets it right on the line, and Yekimov is fuming. Bortolami, Yekimov, and the sprint is taken by Bo Hamburger from Frankie Andreu, and I think then we will have seen Laurent Dufaux just after that. But what a sprint finish that was, and Bortolami has landed the greatest win of his career. A man who found his fame and fortune here a couple of years ago in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain when he won 2 stages on 2 separate occasions. This year he didn't ride the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, so he saved his victory for the one that really mattered, and that is a win in a World Cup Classic. And what a great race it was towards the end. The Leeds Classic then won by Gianluca Bortolami, and it just continues the trend of the Italian victories this year. This is the sprint. At this point here, I really felt for a moment that Yekimov had it, and then he realized he didn't, as Bortolami stole the show on the day, and he deserved it. The last man to attack, Yekimov really rode that like an amateur. Andre Schmil arriving a long way down and out of the points today. Lance Armstrong with him, no points for the world champion, who had climbed up to 4th overall after the race last week in San Sebastian. But today they're going to have to just rely on the points they have. And Johan Museo also not scoring, so this is leaving the final 3 races of the World Cup a really close affair, because Bortolami must now be considered a challenger for the World Cup. He gets 50 points for that victory today. Yekimov comes in with his first points at 35. There's a wry smile on the face of Lance Armstrong on the right as he looks across at the other two and thinks, well lads, none of us have scored today, so we're all going to have to work it out again next time out. Well, in the end they fought out a shoulder-to-shoulder sprint, but just watch Yekimov on the left of the picture. He banged his crash helmet on the handlebars. He really did know he made the biggest mistake of the day. The result is Gianluca Bortolami winning the day in 6 hours, 3 minutes and 29 seconds, the same time, of course, of Vyacheslav Yekimov. 11 seconds later, Bo Hamburger wins the sprint for 3rd place, followed by Andreu and Dufaux. Sean Yates finished 13th, 2 minutes 21 seconds back, and Lance Armstrong led home his group 3 minutes 3 seconds back, and behind him Johan Museo and Andre Schmil. Maurizio Fondries, the Tour of Britain winner, well, he finished in 32nd place. What a marvellous season Gianluca Bortolami is having. A stage win in the Tour de France, and now a World Cup victory as well. Alongside him on the podium, Vyacheslav Yekimov and the Dane Bo Hamburger.
Well, it was a very tough tactical race today. Were you surprised that it split up like that towards the end?
Yeah, I mean, on Homos there went some groups away, and TVM had to chase. We have nobody in the front, and in the final was a lot of attacks, and you need a little bit of luck to get in the right attacks. And but you know, it's a hard race, and you have to be strong to be there, but it's always a little bit tactical towards the end.
It's been a good race here in England.
Yeah, I have a very nice week.
Overall in the World Cup competition, with 3 races still to go, no change at all in the top 5 today, but Gianluca Bortolami now climbs up to 6th place from 25th. Vyacheslav Yekimov is 14th, Frankie Andreu is 18th, Bo Hamburger now comes in at 20th. Sean Yates is 27th. So at the end of the day, things worked out quite well for Andre Schmil. He keeps his white jersey as leader of the World Cup competition. So the official police estimate around the course today, 300,000 spectators. It really has been a most popular time for the sport of cycling in Britain this summer. Well, the curtain has now come down on cycling here on Channel 4 till next season, and we've enjoyed bringing you the action, and thanks for being with us. From the cycling team here, goodbye.